thanks everyone for logging in this evening. We are very fortunate to have with us Christopher Leong, who is really a person who requires little by way of an introduction. He is a former president of the Malaysian Bar, as well as a former president of LAWASIA. Chris, welcome and good evening to you. Could I start by asking if you could tell us about yourself and your practice as well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Greg. First of all, I'm mindful that it is a Friday, and so most of us have better places to be. So I thank all of you for being here. I thank Stephen Thiru and Sudhar Partnership as well, and all the partners, Greg as well, who has been engaging me on this. So I think just by way of a quick introduction, I was called to the bar in 1990. So I've been in practice now. Oh, my maths is not so good. That's why I didn't do accountancy. I think 32 years or thereabouts. So before that, I was at Monash University, and I read philosophy and economics. And then after that, I read law at the University of Nottingham. Did my bar in England, member of admitted as a member of Lincoln's Inn. And then I came back to practice in 1990. Oh, well, pupillage in 1989 and then practice in 1990. Yeah. So, first off the bat, my practice from day one has always been in litigation. I knew from the start that I wanted to be a litigator. In fact, I had wanted to be in the Attorney General's chambers. I held no other ambition whilst I was at university. My mind was made up very early that I wanted to come back home. Many of my friends, were looking for opportunities or deciding whether they were going to stay on, whether in Australia or whether in England. But I remember that I was very firm that I want to come back and I wanted to contribute in public service, hence the Attorney General's chambers, and specifically become a DPP, because I thought that is where I could most contribute to Malaysia and the community. So I graduated from Nottingham in 88, I think, and then did my bar 88 to 89. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And for those of us who may recall, those were the watershed years for the Malaysian judiciary in particular, but generally for institutions in Malaysia. That was the 2 years where the judiciary came under attack. And I bring that up now because it appears that we are kind of swimming in the same waters, but I'll come to that later. So because of that, I was keeping up with the news, and I remember that in between hearing or listening to Sheila Majid and reading the news about Malaysia, feeling homesick, raring to come back and start my career as a DPP, the Lord President then, who office now is styled as the Chief Justice, was tribunalized. And the then Attorney General Abu Talib was the assisting officer, but in reality, the prosecutor. And that episode changed my mind. I could not see myself coming home and serving in that institution because of the attack by the executive with the complicity of the Attorney General's chambers in that tragic episode. I could not see myself starting my career there. And that's when I decided to, okay, I'm about to finish my bar, and I have not applied for a place in a law firm. And I remember my friend who was doing the bar with me, he had applied to several, and he had, I think, a couple of offers, and he chose Chui and Company at that time. I mean, now we are called Chui and Company in Changan Arif. By the time it was Thiru and Company, I asked him why. And amongst other things that he said, oh, you know, it was at that time, I think about the top 5 or top 6 in terms of size as a law firm in Kuala Lumpur and so forth. But the thing that stuck in my mind was that Thiru and Company was the only law firm that provided lunch. So because of that, I decided, okay, I'm going to apply to Thiru and Company. And it was a good thing, actually, in the sense that every lunch well, Thiru and Company was established by Mr. Chui Mansao in 1962. I joined it as a pupil in 1989. And they've had this tradition, therefore, for decades by the time I joined them. And it carried on for decades until we moved to new premises, and then we didn't have the facilities. And lunch was good because we catered lunch, and we had a pantry big enough. Everybody sat on little stools. Mr. Chui, all the partners, all the lawyers, all the pupils, all the staff, down to the delivery and dispatch employees. We sat down to lunch, and it was free seating. And that's how we got to know each other as a firm. So I began in litigation, have stayed in litigation. I dipped my toes in corporate work for about 1.5 years, but found that it wasn't for me. So I came back to litigation. Became a partner in Thiru and Company in January 1996, after 5 years in practice. And, you know, those days, it was equity partner straight away. You know, we didn't have the layering as we do now, especially in the big law firms. And so I have been a partner since 1996. I became a managing partner of Thiru and Company in 2007, and I stood down as managing partner last month. After I think about how long, 14, 15 years, and that is too long. That is really overstaying. I've always believed that, you know, there must be renewal. You know, even 8 years would have been stretching it. Yeah, no matter how capable or otherwise a person is. But anyway, I stood down as a managing partner, so I am a partner now at CCA, and still in litigation. I think I have no regrets having made that choice. So that's and you know, in the early days, Thiru and Company's litigation department was really a support department, in the sense that Thiru and Company, when I joined it, was known for its definitely banking and finance work, as well as its real estate work and corporate work. But it must be in the context that in the late 1980s, corporate work in Malaysia is not what corporate work is like today. You know, in a sense, it's more sophisticated, it's faster paced, more demanding, more specialized, and so forth, more developed, both in depth and width. So in that law firm, litigation was a support service, so to speak. Yeah. But we decided in 1996, sorry, when I became a partner. Because in those days, the heavy lifters or the big boys in litigation were the big firms, the 3 S's, Shuklin, Shern, Screen. You know, that they had a lot of litigators. In fact, it was, I think, an aspiration for all budding lawyers to find a place in one of those 3 firms, especially if they want to do litigation. But in 1996, when I became partner, the senior partner in my law firm, Dato' Wong Soon Fo, and I'll speak more about him because he was one of the figures that made a big difference in my career and life. He retired. He retired quite young, actually. I think in his 50s or mid 50s. And so in Thiru and Company, there was no senior litigation practitioner. And it was important because, as a young lawyer, there's no way that you can get exposed to, involved in meaty litigation unless you have a senior, a recognized senior with standing who actually brings in that type of work, and then you assist and you learn and grow in that capacity. But I decided to stay on in Thiru & Company and decided that this was an opportunity to write my own book, so to speak. And since then, now, our litigation department is, of course, long no more a support service. We have a full-blown corporate, commercial, capital markets litigation department. But I remember at that time in 1996, I was very firm in my mind that I wanted to try to build a litigation department and a law firm like no other in Malaysia, namely a litigation department that can straddle both commercial litigation work as well as public interest work. And I remember at the time I had two young pupils. Well, not my pupil, but two pupils in the firm. Lim Tak San, who's now my partner, and Edmund Bond, who was my partner, but he's since set up on his own. And I remember taking both of them out for coffee before I decided to accept partnership. So this would have been late 95. And I said this was what I wanted to try and do. And, if the two of you would be agreeable, I would ask Lim Tak San to help me build the corporate litigation practice. And then I asked Edmund Bond to help me build the public interest criminal practice. And of course, being young and foolish, everybody jumped in with everything that we had. And I must say that we did pretty well. I think we were about the only law firm that could maintain that. There were other law firms that tried it. I know Shuklin did. So they had Kamarul, I think, who was a DPP, joined them to help them set up the department. But I think I was told, so this is what they call it, it's not a fact, it's just what I was told, that there were difficulties because it didn't coalesce comfortably with a full-blown commercial practice. There were some clients who were, a little bit unsure about this, whereas we, by design or otherwise, happen to have been recognized as not an establishment firm. And that is largely the blame of Mr. Chui. It is his fault because of the BMF scandal.
Yes.
So those of you who may know, that was then the biggest financial scandal involving 2 billion ringgit in the mid-80s, around 84, 85, 86. 2 billion ringgit then, I think, would be equivalent to about, I don't know, about 50 billion ringgit now. So it was then the equivalent of the 1MDB scandal that we have today. And Mr. Chui and then the managing partner of KPMG at the time and the Auditor General of Malaysia were appointed by Bank Bumi Putra, which was a GLC, government bank, so to speak, set up a special committee of inquiry to inquire into the scandal. But there was a lot of pressure. So on the face of it, there was this committee, but in the background, there was a lot of pressure in terms of the work, interference with the work of the committee. And ultimately, the members of the committee were told that they were not to publish their findings. So what happened was the members of the committee got together and said, look, we need to make our findings public. And overnight, they printed, bound copies of it. They had printers who remained anonymous, helping the committee do that. But you will note that the report was only signed by two of the committee members. The then Auditor General of Malaysia, a fantastic man, Courageous, and Mr. Chui, the then managing partner of KPMG, excused himself from signing that report. And then that made the news all over Asia, not only in Malaysia. And since that time, the Thiru Company was seen as a non-establishment law firm. So when we started this, I inherited that reputation. So it was never in our mind that would having a public interest, criminal law practice, be uncomfortable fit for It's unfortunate that Edmund Bond left. I think he left us, I think maybe about 8 years ago, and set up on his own. So ever since then, it was not difficult because you need dedicated people to do it. You also need the law firm to support it, because public interest litigation, by and large, you need to fund it. It doesn't generate money, at least not in Malaysia, So that's background, my background and my practice. I think. Okay, sorry. Is this going to be a Q&A session, or do I just follow the questions here?
Oh yeah, well, we were hoping. We were hoping for it to be a Q&A, but you've actually covered. You've covered a number of the other points. But if I can maybe just ask you, Chris, you spoke briefly about your interest in public interest issues when you were in university. Would you say you had a mentor in your formative years in practice that kind of developed that interest when you first started?
Yeah. Yes, I was very fortunate. I did. And I was even more fortunate that it wasn't just one person. I think that without realizing, I think I had that streak in me when I was already in university. I remember attending at Monash University a protest when Robert Mugabe, then the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, came. We lined up where we were supposed to be waving flags to welcome him. So we did. And then when he got out of his car, we threw the flags away and took out tomatoes and chucked at him. So that was at university. But in my early years in legal practice, I must say that I spent, I think, maybe my first 3 years or so, maybe a little bit more, completely immersed in banking and civil litigation. At that time, it was a mixed bag. So I just did everything from IP disputes to retail bank collection, credit card, hire purchase, to housing loans, to insurance work, running down medical negligence, a bit of receivers and managers insolvency, everything. And I didn't spend any time at all, zero, in public interest, until I bumped into a gentleman by the name of Raja Aziz Adrus. Some of you may have heard his name, but I know he has since passed on, unfortunately. And with the passage of time, I think some younger lawyers may not have heard of him. In my estimation, he is the greatest president of the Malaysian Bar ever. He's president of Malaysian Bar 3 times, once in every decade, first in the 70s, 80s, and then 90s. And in his second and third edition as president of the Malaysian Bar, he was called by the members of the bar to step up and take over the presidency because we were going through very difficult times and we needed his safe hands. He was the one that exposed me, or rather rekindled or lit the spark in me, having an interest in public interest work. And so I became his junior. I followed him in some, not all. He had quite a few young lawyers that he was trying to encourage. I was one of them. So I assisted him in some of the public interest work. So Raja Aziz, definitely. It so happened also that my law firm was very encouraging of everybody from pupils to partners to contribute towards public interest matters and the bar. Yeah. So I had the support of, and that's very important. As a young lawyer, you are not the master of your own time. So if you are going to be getting yourself seriously involved in bar matters as well as public interest matters, you need the law firm to support you. And I had wonderful partners then who supported me. Yeah.
Sure. And why would you say it is important for lawyers, particularly young lawyers, to be involved in public interest issues, Chris?
Okay. I think it is actually very important for all lawyers. It's not just young lawyers, and there is no what I call a time slot or expiry date for a person to be involved in public interest and to contribute back to the profession. And I say contribute back to profession only by way of the profession being a conduit to contributing to the country and the community. And the reason why I say that is because of anything and everything that one could learn and be trained in. Law is the only discipline unique in training and imparting abilities and values to a person that no other calling or learning could provide. I'm not saying none of them provide any of it. They do. But to me, the reading of law and the training in law equips us specially for public interest matters. Our skills, our thinking abilities, our ability to be resilient, to be steadfast in our beliefs, and then be able to articulate it. Why is it that you are steadfast? Which is a nice way of saying stubborn. Yeah.
And Chris, when I briefly introduced you, I mentioned your involvement in the Malaysian bar and and LAWASIA as well. Why do you feel that it is important to be involved in organizations like that?
Okay, for two reasons. I think one is it's not the only avenue, but I think it's a natural avenue. In the sense that if one uninitiated, unexposed individual says, I have an interest and I wish to contribute, the natural organization and venue for that would be the Bar Association, because you are a member of it. And the Bar Association, I'm very proud, the Malaysian Bar, I'm very proud to say, is very good at what it does, and has been doing it for decades. In fact, the Malaysian Bar has been feted internationally by other bars and international bars. There's a professor in Melbourne University who was given a professorial chair to study the Malaysian Bar and write a book about it. Yeah, I don't know whether the book is out. And there have been special sessions, plenary sessions at international law conferences where the topic was the Malaysian Bar. And why is it so special? The Malaysian Bar is the only law organization I know in the entire world that has been recognized by the United Nations for our work as a bar association. So there is an immediate access to such an organization. And unlike other public interest organizations, which are subject matter focused, so if you have BERSE, is about clean, fair elections and so forth. Tenaga Nita is about migrant workers, and whereas the bar is very broad-based, and that's why we have over 40 committees manned by people who are specifically interested and have a passion for that area. So that's why it is a good conduit, as I said earlier. Yeah.
Just to follow up on the aspect of your involvement with the Malaysian Bar and LAWASIA, Mr. Chris, we're interested to know how have you been able to balance an active commercial practice with your engagement in public interest issues as a lawyer through these organizations?
Okay, so let me understand your question. When you say balance, is on the basis that I'm still standing and alive and still having some marbles in the right places.
That's right.
But as you can see, my hair has gone white. You can tell even from Stephen Thiru, his hair has gone white. Greg's will be soon, and the bags under my eyes. But balancing it really is up to you as to how much you want to do and how little you want to do. You will be able to do more from two things. One, your environment must be supportive. And therefore, one of the environments, actually, there are two major environments, or three. One would be your law firm. Your law firm must be supportive, right? You certainly can't be balancing it if you are sneaking out to do something and so forth. So your law firm must support you. So I was fortunate, as I said, Thiru & Company fully supported me, even to the extent that when I became president of the bar, I said that, look, for me to do my job properly as president of the bar, I don't think I can balance. So I didn't balance at that time my commercial practice. And my partners agreed to give me a 2-year sabbatical. And I think I'm the only bar president that I know of who has been afforded that luxury, to take 2 years out of practice and just focus on being a president of the bar. The second thing is I was able to balance it because of one of the nuggets that dropped from Raja Aziz Adrus when we were having a drink. And he said, Chris, you should spend some time developing yourself in commercial litigation. Be as good a lawyer, practitioner in that field which you have chosen. He's talking in the context of me, being a commercial litigation, commercial and corporate litigator. And he says the reason for that is because public interest work and activities do not pay. It doesn't put food on your table. And it's a marathon. And if you want to be able to sustain yourself, you must find funding. And therefore, the best thing to do, be self-reliant, is to be the best lawyer that you can be, so that you will eventually have financial security. And financial security is not the end objective. Financial security is the enabler. It then enables you to do more, to spend more time. And the more senior you become, the more that you can contribute, perhaps in a different way. So that's how I was luckily able to balance it. The other area, as I said, the environment is your family. Your family must be able to understand why you do things, because many a time you find yourself speaking in a language that nobody understands. What I mean is the values that you espouse, everybody think, oh, no, I don't think so. You know what I mean? So your family must be understanding and support you, especially the more frontline situations you find yourself in. Yeah.
But do you think, in your experience, being a senior veteran lawyer yourself, do you think it has become more difficult to balance an active commercial practice with engaging in public interest issues because of how fast-paced practice has become?
Yes, I would say yes. I've always said that I'm very glad that I'm entering into the last third of my legal career, because I don't think I'll enjoy myself working at the pace it's going. It's almost like you have no time to really digest things, give sufficient depth to your thinking.
Right.
It's almost like touch and go. Everything just comes on your table. So yes, it is it is not easier, certainly. In some ways, it is more difficult. Yeah.
Okay. My follow-up question, Mr. Chris, have there been occasions when your involvement in public interest issues affected your commercial practice? If yes, could you share with us how did you manage such situation?
Okay, perhaps I could think of two instances or examples. I think one, and I think I was then in my second year in practice. I can't, yeah, I think around that. And the firm had at the time one very big corporate client. In fact, one of our biggest corporate client. And I was tasked to evict squatters from a large ex-plantation land for it to be developed into housing and golf course. I will not name it, but it is now a golf course and upmarket residential area. And I remember that the squatters there had been there for quite a while, and they were typically farmers and what do you call fish rearing farmers, and as well as crops. And I remembered that there were about 31 squatters, and I filed the application in court. But when I went to court, I could never find the files. And then one day I found out that the files were kept in the chambers of the judge. And I found that odd. And then I think it was Thursday, before the hearing on the Monday, the client called me and said, okay, Chris, tomorrow night I'd like to invite you to dinner. I've invited the judge as well. And I said, no, I can't be in the company of the judge, and I think you should cancel your dinner. And I left it at that. Then on Friday in the evening, he called me and said, okay, Chris, I've just finished dinner. You don't have to worry about Monday. And I remember then I spoke to Mr. Tree, the then managing partner, and I think, in my second year in practice. And I told Mr. Tree that, I'm sorry, I don't think I can do this matter. And I tendered my resignation. And Mr. Tree said no. He picked up the phone, he called up the client and says, we're discharging ourselves. So that was one. And that's why I said your firm is very important. The firm had to make a decision whether or not, they will just behave as if nothing has happened, because this is a huge corporate client. So I was very lucky. And the second occasion was the Anwar Reformasi. The Sodomy 1 Anwar trial. At that time, I think it was Raja Aziz, Haji Sulaiman, Kapal Singh, who were counsel. Zainul Zakaria was the solicitor on record. The High Court judge was the late Augustine Paul, and Augustine Paul had cited and found Zainul Zakaria guilty of contempt. But the hearing came up before Augustine Paul that day, and I remembered that I received a call from Raja Aziz and Ambiga at that time to ask me whether I would be willing to be on standby and be part of a small legal team to immediately represent Raja Aziz, Haji Sulaiman, Kapal Singh, if they were themselves going to be cited for contempt when they were appearing the next day defending Zainul Zakaria. So I remember we were in the bar room at the time in Bangunan Sultan Abdul Samad, waiting to see if that would happen. And then if it did, we would just rush to court and say we will represent all three of them. But before that, I had to, because I was then a junior partner. This was in the late 90s. So I became a partner in 1996. So I was a very junior partner. So I had to get the okay from the partnership, because this was big profile. You know, Anwar is clearly what do you call, the government was going against him and so forth. And I remember the partners took a vote and there was a tie, right? So, and then I was again then deciding what I was going to do, you know, whether I was going to remain in the firm as a partner or leave it for my beliefs. Fortunately for me, I didn't need to make that decision, because a partner who was on leave heard about it and called up from India. The partner was on holiday in India, called up and cast her vote, and therefore, well, in favor of me participating. So yes, you know, in that sense, both in terms of the partnership and in terms of clients, it does sometimes come to play. But for me, I must say I was fortunate. It didn't happen often because of the very nature of the firm that I was in.
And my follow-up question is, as you mentioned, as you stressed earlier, public interest briefs may carry reputational risk to the firm, especially when it concerns matters which may not necessarily be favored by public opinion. Mr. Chris, do you have any advice on addressing such concerns?
Any advice? I think the only advice is, and this is on an individual basis, you must know what is it that you want. And you must be very clear in your mind what you think is right. And then commit yourself to it. Let that always be your guiding, your compass, right? Because I think that if you make an exception, there is a good chance that you would remain wayward from that path and eventually not be able to find your way back. I'm not saying you definitely won't, but all I'm just saying is that you must know for yourself what is it that you want to do and what you think is right, not what other people think is right, right? And then commit yourself fully to it. Do not be a populist, that's for sure, right? You know, just be true to your calling as advocate. Remember, try and recall, why did you become a lawyer? So for me, I told you why I became a lawyer, right? And that has always been my touchstone, you know. And then be true to your beliefs and values, you know. Do not, as I said, do not be driven by money. Money is an enabler. And if you are able to develop yourself and your practice successfully, you would find that having financial gains and security is a natural consequence of your success as a lawyer. It is a consequence. It should not be an end object. Yeah. And if you have that in your mind, I think it's easy. I won't say it's easy, but it will be easier.
So, Chris, just a few more questions.
Sure.
Being in a firm like ours and the firm from which Sudhar and I came, meeting financial targets is important, and like clocking in your billable hours is also important.
Yep.
What would you say to a lawyer who considers that to be the principal aim of practice ahead of his or her involvement in public interest cases?
Then actually, I think they have not made a financially good choice, because for the stress and time that one puts into lawyering to make money, you would make much more being a banker, investment advisor, or something else, right? So, you know, for the time that I put in being a lawyer, I think I could have made 5 times more, if that's the case. Yeah.
Sure. And earlier when you were speaking about Raja
But
Aziz,
please, Greg, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that making money is not important. It is, like I said, but it is important as an enabler.
That's right.
I will tell you, for example, the late Raja Aziz Adrus, he was financially very comfortable. He was recognized as a top corporate commercial litigator, and he happened to be able to also straddle criminal work. He made very good money, highly respected both at the bar and by judges. I can tell you that it is not an exaggeration to say that some judges even stand up when he walks into court. That was how well respected he was. But he had a huge bungalow at the same time, he had a huge bungalow in Taman Duta. He has a second home in London. He's able to travel with his family to London 3 times a year and take a whole month off and come back and do both commercial litigation work as well as his public interest work. It can be done.
Yeah. And if I can maybe just ask you about that, Chris, you mentioned he was able to straddle in both commercial work and public interest work. Just speaking for yourselves personally, have you found conceptually, like being able to grapple with the concepts in commercial practice at the same time as doing like a judicial review a brief or a constitutional brief? Have you found that to be difficult, being able to kind of conceptually straddle between those two fields? Or do you think it's a little bit of getting used to it, a little bit of work?
I don't know. I don't know about conceptually, but okay. First of all, I think to be a good lawyer, especially a litigation lawyer, of course, quite apart from advocacy skills, I think one has to be a lawyer that has very good skills to comprehend concepts, to understand concepts. And if you have that skill, you will find that although we do specialize now, like not before when I told you I did a mixed bag, but you find lawyers, forget about public interest work, even in commercial corporate practice, you find lawyers will be able to do insolvency, as well as to do capital markets, as well as to do medical negligence, as well as to do a construction claim, and so forth, right? And the lawyers who can do that comfortably, transition from one to the other and back, by and large are lawyers who are able to comprehend and deal with concepts quickly. So for those lawyers, then for them to have to grapple with administrative law and public law and criminal law, constitutional law, I think it would be just another concept that they would have to deal with. Yeah.
Sure. And you mentioned earlier about how Raja Aziz said to you that being involved in public interest cases is like being in a marathon. At least speaking for myself personally, my little involvement in public interest cases, working with Mr. Stephen, it can sometimes be quite disheartening. It can sometimes be very challenging because the amount of work you put in and then the outcome may not be something that you are looking forward to. Now, have you ever yourself felt disheartened?
Oh yes, many a time. Many a time. I remember as a young lawyer, again, being a junior for Raja Aziz Adrus, and I remember this was when we were in Penang. So Raja Aziz Adrus and another friend of mine, Gopal Srinivasan, and I, we were juniors to Raja Aziz defending Marina Yusof, who was a former UMNO Wanita chief, on a charge of sedition under the Sedition Act. And I remember at the end of that a particular day, we were again having drinks, and I was feeling tired, as Greg said, a little bit disheartened, because I know we were going to lose, but nevertheless, we gave it 100%, and we have been losing. So I asked Unku Aziz this question. I said, Unku, aren't you tired? You've been doing this far longer than I have, and I'm really tired. I'm asking myself, we know the outcome, and yet we still do it. And you know, he finished his beer and he said to me, Chris, it is important that we ensure that we are in the line to knock on the door. The door may not open when we are standing in front of it, but it's important that you keep knocking. And then when you are too tired, you have no longer any energy, you step aside. And the next person in the line will step up, take your place, and continue knocking on that door. Eventually, it will open. And I've seen it. So in the context of the Sedition Act, Marina Yusof at the Butterworth Sessions Court, there were many more after that. I did the Muhammad Ezam, Tian Chua, Hishamuddin Rais, and Sari Sungip appeal in the federal court. And eventually, we see cases starting to turn. And we see ISA being repealed. And that is after 30 years or more. So it is a marathon. And you just have to make sure that you are there to knock on the door when you're tired, exhausted, completely deflated. Somebody else will take your place.
That's a fantastic advice. Just a final question from me. What would you say are the steps that our lawyers can take to become more active in public interest work?
I think that you should take an interest, and it is an easy introduction. It is easy introduction in the sense that you can immediately volunteer in the committees or activities of the bar. Sure. So that's how I started. One day, there was a call out by the Bar Council for volunteer lawyers to defend the Reformasi defendants. The police were arresting by the thousands the street protesters. These were stall owners, clerks, dispatch boys, and they were having mass trials, anywhere from 60 to 120 defendants per trial, charged for various offenses. And I remember I volunteered. I knew nothing about criminal law. The Bar Council made sure that each team was led by an experienced criminal practitioner, and we learned on the trot. So my advice is give your time to the activities of the bar.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chris. Those are all the questions I had. Could I perhaps open up the floor to the rest of the firm to see if anyone had any questions of their own for Chris? Chris, it's been, I think, quite a long week for us, and I think it's been a long week for you as well. Yep. But thanks so much for your time, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. Could I just end off by just saying a couple of things?
Sure, please.
One is, please do not look at public interest work as a CSR. It is not. Public interest work is about giving yourself to it. That means your intellect and your skills. Your skills and intellect are those of a lawyer. So do not think that giving money, for example, is playing your part. That may be playing your part if you were a tycoon, and so they give money, and of course you need money. But our part is the giving of our skills, right? So don't look at it as a CSR. Look at it as a responsibility because of our training and our special abilities. The second thing I would like to say is that I started off, I think, alluding to, I think we are maybe in a similar situation, potentially similar situation as in 1988-89, when the judiciary was under attack. The independence of the judiciary was under attack. I think some, if not all of you, may know from the news that a judge, specifically two, actually, the Chief Justice herself and another judge have been coming under attack. And if that is not checked or resisted, it could very easily and quickly spiral out of hand. So I would ask that you give some thought to it, right? Because we are lawyers and the judiciary is our natural friend. We protect each other. The judges cannot speak like we do publicly by virtue of their office. We are their mouthpiece. We are their shield and we are their sword. We are fortunate, unlike in 1988-89, we are fortunate that this time round, we have a very strong Chief Justice and we have a good judiciary. And therefore, stepping out and defending them is worthwhile. We did it then in 88 and 89, and we continue fighting for an independent judiciary as an institution. But there were judges then and Chief Justices then that were actually part of the problem. So the bar and lawyers nevertheless put themselves forward to defend the institution, even though they didn't particularly like the individuals. This time round, fortunately for us, we have a Chief Justice and judges who deserve any sacrifice that we can make to defend them and speak up for them. And I can tell you that the judges are likewise thinking that. So please let me just read you. I was so inspired by the speech of the Chief Justice 2 days ago. I just read you excerpts. So she said this: it is important to emphasize that the judiciary is the last line of defense in a constitutional democracy, and there must never be a suspicion that the judiciary is captured. Now, I would say that one, of course, it is very brave of her. Of course, it's incumbent upon the Chief Justice to say that, but it is very brave of her to in fact say it. And actually, the same can be said of us. Lawyers and the bar should be at the front line and the rear guard in the defense of an independent judiciary. We are there with the judiciary as the last line of defense. The judiciary cannot speak for themselves. We, as I said, must speak for them. And like the judiciary, therefore, the bar must never be captured. Our leadership cannot be captured, right? And the responsibility sits squarely on each of our shoulders. And then I'll read you the last excerpt from Her Ladyship's speech. And she then goes on to say, under no circumstances should we falter. The integrity of the justice system and the independence of the judiciary can never be compromised under any circumstances. Come what may, we must remain strong, resilient, and be steadfast in upholding the rule of law. I mean, God bless us. We really have a strong and inspiring leader. Now we, lawyers, must play our part. We cannot be seen to be wanting at all. Yeah. And I tell you why. Because Section 42, subsection 1A of the Legal Profession Act sets out our very purpose, and that is to uphold the cause of justice without regard to our own interests or that of the members of the bar, uninfluenced by fear and favor. And subsection G says to protect and assist the public in all matters touching, ancillary, or incidental to the law. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was a very, very timely advice.
Thank
And
you,
if,
Mr. Chris.
if ever there was a way to end this session, that was it. Thank you so much, Chris. Have a fantastic long weekend.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks. Have a good long weekend. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.